For years, the geography of artificial intelligence was simple. The cutting edge of compute lived inside a few zip codes in Northern California, sustained by absolute control over the world's data and hardware. But that centralized grip has slipped. Across the Pacific, new engines of compute are spinning up. Four distinct, highly competitive technological ecosystems are now emerging across East Asia, each building its own path toward computational sovereignty. The trigger for this fracture arrived in January 2025. A Hangzhou-based startup released DeepSeek R1, a highly capable language model that triggered an immediate, massive sell-off across the U.S. tech sector. This chart shows the APOC AI Capabilities Index over time. Notice the purple triangles representing Chinese open models rapidly approaching and intersecting the blue squares representing top-tier United States models. They achieved this parity despite operating under severe U.S. semiconductor export bans. Western hardware restrictions actually accelerated a pivot toward hyper-efficient designs that allow Eastern labs to do more with less compute. Chinese governments channeled $912 billion into AI, while private capital clustered on the coast, government funds heavily dispersed across interior provinces. In over 70% of jointly backed firms, the government invested first, marking targets for private markets to follow. When U.S. chip bans restricted access to brute force compute, these developers pivoted to a specific software design, the mixture of experts' architecture. A model like DeepSeek R1 contains 671 billion parameters in total, but it selectively activates only about 37 billion of them for any given calculation. This drastically reduces the physical memory and electricity required to run it. By pairing deep state funding with strict architectural optimization, developers created lightweight, highly capable open-weight models. They deploy easily on cheaper hardware, making them highly attractive to users across the global south. Japan, meanwhile, is largely bypassing the software arms race to focus entirely on controlling physical infrastructure. They are rebuilding an end-to-end domestic semiconductor supply chain. The foundation of this effort is the Rapatis foundry in Hokkaido. Backed by heavy state subsidies, they are targeting domestic mass production of advanced 1.4 nanometer logic chips by 2029. This slide outlines the development goals for Japan's flagship supercomputer, Fugaku Next. It shows the integration of this new sovereign silicon into a unified computing platform, co-developed by Riken, Fujitsu, and NVIDIA. Rather than fighting over open-source code, Japan aims to secure its strategic position by manufacturing the mandatory physical layer that everyone else's software has to run on. South Korea exerts its leverage through a specific hardware bottleneck: high-bandwidth memory. Advanced AI chips require stacking memory directly next to processing cores, and South Korean firms produce nearly all of it. To defend this monopoly against skyrocketing global demand, domestic giants are deploying massive capital. Samsung alone allocated over $73 billion for capital expenditures and research in a single year to secure the next generation of memory tech. They use this hardware leverage to power their K-intelligence framework. Companies like KT and LG have trained distinct foundation models, MEAD and KX01, that natively process Korean social contexts, honorifics, and complex document structures. South Korea secures its position by commanding the critical memory components the world needs, while simultaneously locking down a sovereign software layer tailored precisely to its own culture. Further south, Singapore operates entirely differently. Without massive chip foundries or enormous populations, it leverages its status as a trusted, neutral ground between competing superpowers. Under its National AI Strategy 2.0, the government offers deep compute subsidies, covering up to 70% of development costs, to attract multinational corporations and set up regional testing hubs. They channel this infrastructure into specialized regional models, like Sea Lion. It acts as an intelligence layer built over existing global models, designed specifically to interpret the diverse languages and cultural nuances of Southeast Asia. By prioritizing enterprise integration and regional linguistic relevance, Singapore generates diplomatic and commercial leverage far out of proportion to its physical footprint. These distinct development strategies require equally distinct rules to manage them. This document details the gap in regulatory philosophy. While China enforces strict state-directed security reviews and mandatory algorithm registration, this section highlights Singapore's choice of a soft law, voluntary approach based on market incentives and open-source toolkits. There will be no universal rulebook for artificial intelligence. The geopolitical split ensures that data privacy, safety testing, and algorithmic control will be governed by deeply divided regional standards. Looking at the board today, China holds the software efficiency advantage, and Singapore captures enterprise trust. Yet, software and diplomacy have a hard physical limit. To train a model or route a data center, you eventually have to hit physical metal. You need the chips. Because of that hard constraint, South Korea maintains the strongest absolute leverage. Their high bandwidth memory is the non-negotiable bottleneck required by every competitor attempting to scale their models. Global compute is now a multi-layered ecosystem defined by South Korean memory, Japanese hardware stacks, and Chinese architectural efficiency.